Royal women bled in silence, bound by rules you won't believe. Behind the glittering crowns and jeweled gowns, queens across centuries lived by hidden rituals, rituals that dictated their purity, their power, and even their place in history. From secret chambers to whispered taboos, today, we uncover the forbidden world of menstruation in the royal courts. In medieval and early modern courts, menstruation wasn't just a private matter. It was a public crisis cloaked in silence. Queens and princesses were often deemed ritually unclean. Some European chronicles describe how royal women were forbidden to touch holy relics or participate in court ceremonies during their cycles. In Orthodox and Catholic traditions, a queen in her time of the month was barred from entering sacred spaces. Even the English court in Tudor times had coded restrictions. Records suggest that Queen Elizabeth I herself withdrew from public religious ceremonies during her cycles, disguising her absence under the excuse of ill health. To bleed was to step outside the divine order, and for a queen, this was not only biological, but political. Beyond whispered rules came secret spaces. Archaeological research and palace records hint at women's chambers, rooms within castles where noble women, including queens, were sent during menstruation. In Hindu and Buddhist courts of South Asia, menstruating royals were sometimes confined to separate quarters. The practice wasn't punishment, but ritual separation. Queens were considered too sacred and too dangerous during these days. In some Mughal chronicles, queens of the zenana, imperial harems, kept to their inner chambers, tended by handmaidens, their absence concealed from courtiers to preserve royal dignity. In Tudor England, rumors swirled about Anne Boleyn's supposed irregular bleeding, used by enemies to paint her as cursed and unnatural. In France, Marie Antoinette's fertility and her monthly cycles were political obsessions tracked and whispered about in court. A queen's body was more than her own. It was the future of dynasties. Any delay, irregularity, or complication was seized upon by rivals. Menstrual cycles could crown a queen or destroy her reputation. The silence of queens was filled with superstition. Medieval medical texts claimed that menstrual blood could wither crops, dull mirrors, and even cause dogs to go mad. Some kings believed that contact with a menstruating queen would drain their vitality or corrupt their spiritual purity. Yet paradoxically, other cultures saw royal menstrual blood as sacred. In ancient Maya and Aztec traditions, royal women's bloodletting rituals were linked to fertility of the land and legitimacy of rule. For queens, the same blood that was feared in Europe could be worshipped as divine elsewhere. Behind the curtain of secrecy were the unsung women who managed it all: maids, wet nurses, and handmaidens. Royal attendants kept careful track of the queen's cycles, not for her comfort, but for political timing. In some courts, royal physicians were ordered to document the queen's fertility window. In Versailles, courtiers whispered in anticipation of Marie Antoinette's first period after marriage. It was proof of her maturity and ability to bear heirs. In Mughal harems, a queen's attendants burned scented oils and prepared special baths after menstruation, restoring her to ritual purity before she returned to the emperor's presence. These women lived in silence too, ensuring the queen's body never betrayed her throne. But these revelations are only the beginning, because the most shocking secrets lie ahead, from bizarre royal remedies to rituals of purification to menstrual politics that shaped entire empires. Stay with us as we continue to unravel the hidden menstrual rituals of queens. History tells us that queens were not immune to the pain of cramps, exhaustion, and weakness. But unlike their subjects, they had access to remedies that were equal parts medicine and myth. In 16th century France, physicians prescribed pearl dust tonics, ground jewels mixed with wine, believed to soothe the queen's womb. In the Mughal courts, queens drank spiced concoctions of saffron and honey, thought to regulate cycles and ease discomfort. In Tudor England, herbalists supplied remedies of rue, sage, and chamomile. Yet even these remedies were entangled with suspicion. Too strong a dose of certain herbs could be interpreted as an attempt to prevent pregnancy, a crime that might cost a woman her crown. Pain was never just pain. For queens, it was proof of their humanity, something they were never supposed to reveal. Across cultures, menstruation ended not with relief, but with ritual. In Hindu temples, queens bathed in sacred rivers or in specially prepared palace pools, their return marked by offerings of flowers and incense. In Islamic harems, ritual baths known as ghusl were performed by attendants, restoring the queen to spiritual purity before she rejoined the emperor. In Christian Europe, queens often disappeared for a period of prayer and private cleansing. Though records are vague, many royal households demanded that a menstruating queen undergo a final blessing before resuming religious duties. What might sound like simple hygiene was deeply symbolic. These rituals reminded everyone, even the queen, that her body was bound by forces greater than her crown. A queen's menstrual cycle was a state secret. In the age of dynasties, her ability to conceive was the foundation of entire kingdoms. Court physicians tracked cycles like military campaigns. In Versailles, gossip spread through the halls the moment a royal woman missed her period. Was she pregnant? Was she ill? Was the dynasty secure or doomed? The absence of menstruation could trigger political storms. When Catherine de' Medici struggled to conceive, whispers of infertility shook France. In England, Elizabeth I's unmarried state turned her body into a battlefield of rumor. Each cycle, or its absence, was political currency. Perhaps the strangest belief of all lies in how royal blood, quite literally, was perceived. In some African kingdoms, menstrual blood was seen as a powerful force, dangerous to men, yet essential for fertility rituals. Oral traditions speak of queens whose cycles were linked symbolically to the fertility of the land itself. Contrast this with Europe, where menstrual blood was described as poisonous. Medieval physicians claimed that bees would die if touched by a menstruating queen, or that metal would rust in her hands. For queens, their blood was paradox, feared, worshipped, concealed, and obsessed over, depending entirely on who held power. Through all these rituals, one theme remains constant: silence. Queens rarely spoke of their cycles, yet their bodies shaped treaties, dynasties, and even wars. The fate of kingdoms was determined in hidden chambers, in whispered reports of physicians, in rituals that marked the private life of the most public women on earth. The silence was strategic. To bleed was natural, but to admit it was political suicide. And so the story of royal women is also the story of what was never spoken aloud. But silence was not always enough. Across medieval courts, menstrual taboos carried punishments as heavy as crowns themselves. In some regions, a queen was forbidden from touching holy relics or participating in processions while she bled. To defy these rules was to invite whispers of sacrilege. In France, chronicles tell of queens who were quietly removed from banquets, their absence explained away as illness, when the truth was an unspoken cycle. In Poland, one royal consort was said to be barred from the chapel during her bleeding days, her piety questioned in hushed tones. And the threat could grow darker still. A menstruating queen accused of witchcraft was not unthinkable. If crops failed, if war was lost, if an heir was not born, her blood, natural though it was, could be painted as curse or conspiracy. The silence that protected queens was the same silence that made them vulnerable. They could not speak openly, could not defend themselves. And so rumors multiplied in the shadows, dangerous as any sword. In the end, the queen's body was both throne and prison, exalted as the vessel of dynasties, yet judged and punished for the very rhythms that made her human. From hidden chambers to whispered rituals, from superstition to sacred power, royal women bled in silence. Their cycles were never just personal. They were political, spiritual, and symbolic. To understand queens, we must understand not just their crowns, but their bodies bound by expectations, fear, and rituals now half forgotten. The next time you picture a queen in her jeweled robes, remember the secret history beneath them. If you found this glimpse into hidden royal life as fascinating as we did, make sure to like this video, share it with history lovers, and subscribe for more untold stories of the past. Because history isn't just about kings and crowns. It's about the hidden truths that shaped their world.